Welcome back to another edition of Why Did Player X Become a Bust? Today we're talking about Jameis Winston, who I should say is not guaranteed to be a bust just yet. He might end up being the starter for the Saints, probably will be, so it's not over by any means, but it's certainly fair to say he hasn't met expectations of a number one overall pick up until this point, to say the least. I mean, they got rid of him. Tampa Bay Buccaneers did, won a Super Bowl out of it, but, still, and now the Saints, they had him as the third-string quarterback last year, but he might still start this year. So let's talk about really what went wrong. And first, we have to talk about what people thought of him when he got drafted, because looking on Walter Football, it's incredible. Right here, you see, this is the strengths. I actually had to edit it to get all the stuff on the same page. Typically, it's just in one line, but I had to edit it over because you wouldn't be able to read it all. There's that much positives. I mean, look, I've never seen this many strengths put on a single page. And again, people always love to say now, oh, Winston, whatever, bust. But people don't really talk about how big of a prospect he was thought of as when he was drafted. I mean, people thought he was going to be a superstar, and he really was. Right now, Trevor Lawrence is the best prospect since Luck, but before then, it was Jameis Winston. It really was. Let's read through him. Excellent pocket passer, phenomenal at making progressions through his receivers, great pocket presence, accurate thrower. We can skip ahead. Some interesting ones come out here where it's like generally a good decision maker. So again, complete opposite of how we think about him now, which is crazy. Advanced field vision, which is funny as well because people talk about, well, now he's had LASIK eye surgery. Maybe he'll be good then. But that was considered a positive when he got drafted, which is interesting. Some things are still, I would say, are still accurate even in the NFL level, like keeps his eyes downfield while scrambling. He is good at that for sure. Makes plays of his feet and throws well on the run. I do agree, even though he wasn't the fastest, he would find ways to make that work. And over to the right, we have, again, impressive football IQ, not something you typically associate with Jameis Winston, but there is reasons for it. And some stuff that I also still, a good teammate, I remember from his time in Tampa Bay, everyone seemingly talked great about him as, a teammate, even if it didn't work well on the field. So a lot of interesting stuff there. Now let's talk about the negatives for Jameis Winston. There's only 4, which is amazing to me, because again, I think that might be the least amount I've ever seen on a prospect, especially a quarterback, and a lot of them aren't even on the field stuff. Immature off the field, sure, definitely. Numerous off the field transgressions, that's essentially the same thing. So really, the only 2 negatives they had in terms of what they saw on film were an increase in interceptions as a sophomore, and he had some slow starts to games in 2014, which is fascinating. So let's watch the tape and see what can we learn about Winston. Is it true that he was just dominant in college and then sucked in the NFL, or were there some takeaways? Like right away, something like this, there's reasons to easily see why Winston got drafted, because he did make some incredible throws. In the NFL, he makes some incredible throws. This is a zone coverage play. You see the route, how this can work. Watch what happens. So Winston takes the snap, and he is going to make this throw, and it is admittedly wide open, but again, rocket of an arm, can throw it downfield, and watch the accuracy. Perfectly where he wanted it. That's just exactly what happened. That's just a great play by Jameis Winston, and he made a ton of those in college. He really did. And then there was stuff like this. So let's talk about the negatives, because while it's true that you definitely saw the obvious positives with Winston, it is very true that you definitely saw the obvious negatives in college as well. And again, using the power of hindsight, which makes these videos so fun for me because I can easily go back and see, oh yeah, there's the flaw. How did those stupid idiots miss it? When the reality is, I very well might have missed it as well, because again, hindsight is 20/20. You see that the one mistake in college ends up being a big deal in the NFL, whereas other players have mistakes that seem more obvious, but doesn't become an issue in the NFL. But anyways, so this is zone coverage, and you see the routes that are on the screen. He's going to try to hit the go route, but watch the accuracy. I mean, you see Winston, it seems like he kind of maybe hesitated for a second and then just throws it way over his head. And this is something that you certainly saw in the NFL, is every now and then Winston would just completely whiff on a throw that made you wonder, who was he even throwing it to? When I first watched this play, I thought it was maybe a cross-up, but how would it be a cross-up? He was trying to hit a go route, and he overthrew him. That has to be a missed throw unless he thought the cross-up was that it was going to be one of those backyard football plays where someone all of a sudden pops up and makes the catch. There's also something like this where this is a good angle to show. So he's under pressure. He's falling backwards a little bit, and you see he's going to sort of throw like a jump shot to try to make it through that very tight window. And it's something like that makes you just wonder, okay, clearly there's guys who believe they can make every throw, and then there's Jameis Winston. If he sees an opening, he's going to take that opening no matter what. And honestly, it was even more true in college than it was in the NFL. And as you see, it was predictably intercepted. And then there was also just stuff like this where you're going to see him, get hit as he's throwing and loses the football. Lack of pocket presence there for sure, and also just the fumbling thing. A lot of guys don't lose the football when they get hit like that. And again, not knowing where the pressure is, not a huge deal, but though this is kind of an example of something that maybe I wouldn't have noticed in real time, but in hindsight, you can see how big of a problem that became in the NFL. So then when he got to the NFL, he still made a lot of the same mistakes. And this is in his 5th year, and this was week 16 in his 5th year. So he's played almost 5 seasons, about 4.5 seasons up until this point, because he got hurt a little bit and suspended for 3 games. So about 4.5 seasons into his NFL career, he was still making mistakes like this. It's a cover one robber play, which means that one of the safeties is going to come over the middle and cover that middle area, which this isn't an uncommon coverage by any means. It's a little bit uncommon, but it's pretty basic. It's pretty simple, and you see the route that Winston wants to throw to. And so right when this play starts, you notice that right here, so there is an opening. You can see why Winston wants to make this throw, but he just has no idea that it's a robber concept. He just never read that, which is part of what made Winston really frustrating to watch at times as a Buccaneers fan, during his career, is that there was a lot of these sort of simple reads that he just wouldn't get. And as you see, it's going to get intercepted. So that's kind of the thing, is a lot of these post-snap reads Winston really struggled with. And again, a lot of people say he's a really high IQ football player. I don't doubt that in a classroom he can be. Like that seems possible to me. I don't see any reason why it isn't. But that doesn't always translate to being a good decision maker. And clearly, he wasn't a good decision maker in the NFL. Maybe Sean Payton has coached that out of him. But at this point, with all of the people that have tried to coach it out of him, it seems unlikely. So what is the lesson for Winston? Well, maybe the lesson for GMs looking for a quarterback is basically, I guess, a couple of things. One thing you could argue is that no matter how high of a prospect someone is, nobody is bust-proof. That just is the fact. And maybe the other factor is you could sit here and say, well, Winston did throw some very pretty balls. I'm not sure if everyone paid attention to the negatives. People might have paid too much attention to just the positives and not paid enough attention to the negatives. Because again, the only 2 negatives that happened were he had slow starts, but then he would always win those games, and then, an increase in interceptions as a sophomore, but I don't really care about stats as a whole. So maybe that's it. And that when I watched it, I did see some negatives. So maybe just try to make sure you always do your due diligence. And even if you love a prospect, look at the ways it can fail. That's probably the best lesson to learn here from Jameis Winston, I would say. But it's tough. I mean, this is an understandable mistake, in my opinion, by Jason Light, the guy who drafted Winston, and it worked out for him. He got Tom Brady and won a Super Bowl anyways. So one of the rare instances where you mess up a first overall pick and still get a Super Bowl 6 years later. But yeah, that's what I think. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.